Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the latest in a series of official supporters club chats. We're delighted to say that this evening we have with us our current mayor and former coach for the Central Coast Mariners, Lawrie McKinna. Welcome, Lawrie.
Good evening, everyone. How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you so much for giving up your time to have a chat with us tonight. It'd just be great to just dig a little bit more into your backstory personally, and then talk about your thoughts on the A League in general and the future of the football in Australia. I know you've been a part of the landscape for quite a long time, but I'd like to start this evening off just by mentioning that you were instrumental, in fact, in the formation of the OSC right at the start of its inception when you were still with the club. And I'm just ask if you're pleased to see that it's still in existence after more than a decade.
No, definitely. I think it's important that supporters have a voice and a productive voice, not one where they're just on banging at the club. It's a great way to for supporters to express what their thoughts are because it's important for clubs. They can't be in a cocoon and think everything's rosy because there are always problems. It doesn't matter how successful you are, there are always going to be some problems that need to be fixed. And if you've got a voice, well, it helps it. So, because I've always just looked at my time at the Mariners and Northern Spirit before that at Newcastle. I'm just a fan. I'm a punter. Um, who's managed to get a living out of football, but I've got a voice as well as a football supporter, and it's important that you get listened to sometimes.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think there've been good times and not so good times at the club, and we've certainly had to, at times, the OSC certainly had to walk something of a high wire in terms of trying to speak to the club and make the fans' views known without abusing that privilege or getting offside or unnecessarily airing dirty laundry. And I'm pleased to say that that's not been so necessary in more recent years, but there were certainly periods where things like the North Sydney Oval games and things like that, there was a lot of controversy around those kind of things. And we hold our heads high insofar as a group we always were. We tried to be the voice of reason and tried to make the club see sense from a common sense standpoint. So we're great here for initiating that dialogue all those years ago at the Settlers Arms, as I recall. And yeah, it's been quite a ride for us all, I think.
Yeah, well, that moving to North Sydney, I might have said a few choice words to some senior management or owners at the club as well when I was the mayor of Gosford. Um, so that was and that was stand up for the Mariners when we did those the march and we doubled the crowd and amazingly they reckon they couldn't get a real because I know there were about 11,000 at that game against Brisbane and which was about double the crowd and the club said that the turnstiles never worked that day, so they couldn't tell us what crowd it was. But I knew what the crowd was because I had been coach for 5 years and could pick it within a few hundred. So, but no, it showed it shouldn't take that. It's frustrating sometimes looking for the outside, going, how do we get these people here? They need to realise how important it is to support the club. But we certainly the supporters and everybody got behind that and stood up for the Mariners and kept it on the coast.
Yeah, I think it's been an. I mean, I still look at the photographs from the first couple of seasons, and basically a virtually full stadium in some games, and so very very healthy crowds, and it's kind of waxed and waned over the years, but obviously success does bring bigger crowds, and to get a record crowd at the grand final season before last was quite something to behold, really.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Well,
assuming, yeah, Laurie.
I was there. I was there, and no, I think the last three seasons, and it's been a great run the club's had, and I know it dropped off this year, but you can't sustain that quality on the field when you get rid of five or six boys at the end because you have to because you sell them or they leave like Nisbet and stuff. You know, you can't always maintain that. When you're not spending the big money, you can't maintain that. And it was just great this year. The women's team stood up and they tain a bit of the glory this year, which was fantastic to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, it was a tough season for the fans again this year, but football's, as you know more than anyone else, I'm sure football is cyclic and it goes around and comes around. So hopefully the good times aren't too far away. We're not going to have a repeat of the slide that we had previously. Turning to yourself, who would you say influenced your decision to pursue a career in football? Was it a conscious decision? First as a player and then as a coach.
In Scotland, when I came here when I was a young boy, when I was 2, and I went back when I was 5. My mum and dad couldn't settle, and I don't know what it was when I went back. I just wanted to. I remember going to school for the first day, and I can remember saying I was going to play with Rangers, and I was going to earn £100 a week, and I don't know why. My mum and dad weren't religious, so they never drummed the Protestant thing into me about Catholics and Protestants. I just wanted to play with Rangers, and that was my dream. And I played with the primary school, and then when I went to high school, I never made the team the first year. I played the next 2 years, and then ended up playing with my amateur team as a striker because I was big and strong and stupid, and I'd run into people in that. But um, just out of the blue, I gave the game away for a couple of years. I went and followed Rangers. I followed Rangers all over Europe and just played with the youth club team. And then I got back into the semi Darvel Juniors, which is a village only 5 miles away. And the first game I played, there were a scout there from, oh, who was it from? Can't remember who it was from. But then through that, because I'd played a couple of good games, one of the committee was up at Jim McLean's house, who was the Dundee United manager, and he just said, "Are there any good young players down there?" And I was 19. I was married at the time with a kid. Me and Christina get married and with a baby, and I went up to Dundee United, who had been the Scottish champions that year, and went out in trial, scored only a goal a game, and they set up. I was too old at 19 to sign with them, but they set up because Jim McLean, the ex-coach and Scottish legend coach, he used to play with Kilmarnock, so he contacted the club and they got me to come out, and I played 2 trial games and scored 4 goals, and scored one at the weekend when against St Mirren, when the first team were playing at St Mirren. In those days you played reverse fixtures.
Yeah.
And then I played against Motherwell on the Tuesday night, and I think 3 or 4 goals, and they signed me on the spot, and I couldn't sign it quick enough. And at that time, Kilmarnock were part time, and they just won promotion back up to the Premier League. So within 3 months, I made my debut in the Scottish Premier League against Hibs. I come off the bench, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't even have my own car. I went to the game in the bus, the service bus, which was like 10 miles away from our house. And I walked in, I just happened to look at the team sheet, and I saw my name as a sub. That's when you're allowed 2 subs. And I just about shit myself. I went, what? That's my name. And 5 of the first team players had went on strike, and for more bonus money. So I got drafted in and put in the bench and come off the bench and made my debut in the Premier League, which was great. And only made 3 appearances that year. Then I got relegated, and that's when I became a regular. So I just dreamt about, like, my first game for Kilmarnock it was the last game of the season because I signed right at the end, was against Rangers reserves at Ibrox, and we get beat 6-1, and I scored the right foot volley, and I was left footed in the top corner against one of my boyhood hero goalkeepers, and we get beat 6-1, but I never gave a shit. I was the happiest man in the world, like, playing at Ibrox. It just all came through. For being a fan to actually playing there was just amazing.
I suppose those are moments that you, as you say, you dream about, playing firstly against your heroes and at a venue which was, very special to you. So it's amazing that you were able to tick that box.
I keep saying to people, dreams come true, and not that I dreamt of being the mayor, but it happened. But no, football, I was just lucky, and you make your own luck. I believe in life, you make your own luck, and if you work hard enough, when I came to Australia to play, I'd been at Kilmarnock for 4 years, and we'd a young family, and I'd always had this inkling to go back to Australia. And when I got a chance to come out and play with a state league club in Melbourne, it was $80 a week. I was getting £70 a win. After tax, I was getting about 50 quid. So I was getting tax free $80 for playing with Box Hill, they paid the airfares, they paid for everything. And I scored a few goals and got sold for $7,000 to Heidelberg. And then I had a good season with Heidelberg, getting sold to Apia for 10 grand. So, huge transfer fees in 1986 and 87. But, and it worked out well. But in that time, probably for the good, like I ruptured my kidneys. I missed the full season of that. I broke my tibia and fibia when I was about 31, and I was out for 2 years. But in that time, I'd done my coaching badges, started doing my coaching badges. And when I came back at Blacktown, I finished their top goal scorer, and Newcastle Breakers signed me in the Old National League, and I stayed there for half a season. But I only done that to prove I could still do it. I was about 34 at the time, and I just proved that so I could do it. And then that's when I done a player coach's role at Hills United, and then I went with Dave Mitchell as assistant coach to Sydney Olympic in the Old National League, and I stayed with Mitch for 5 years as assistant coach and had an amazing time.
How did you find being a player manager? That must have been quite challenging.
It was what I did though, I didn't, because I found out early it was really hard to concentrate and play in and try and organise everybody. So one of my mates that used to play with Brunswick Juventus and played he was a legend in Falkirk in Scotland, Big Brian Brown, who's had an amazing career in the State League coaching teams like Blacktown City and Bonnyrigg. He came in and was my assistant, and it just taken the pressure off me. So when I went on the park, I could play. Yeah. And I didn't need to, all the preparation, yeah, really involved, but the player coach thing, you can't do the two things. So when I was on the park, I was just a player.
Yeah, I was going to say I've coached at amateur level and played, and at the same time, and it's challenging for, even.
You get too much in your head. You just have to concentrate on what you're doing.
Yeah.
I wasn't that good that I could worry about them and worry about myself.
What was it like playing in the NSL back in those days? I mean, I obviously, before my time in the country, but I hear all kinds of stories about how vibrant the NSL was. Are you able to speak about that?
Yeah. So 87, I signed with Heidelberg, and when you played South Melbourne, we'd get between 8,000 and 10,000 people there, and it was a big cultural day. And it was good. There were some big crowds, and you saw that. You see the YouTube stuff, the grand finals and stuff, big crowds. But everybody goes on about how great it was. But when you went to Sunshine, George Cross, or Green Gully, or Blacktown City, you'd be playing in front of 800 people if you're lucky. So it wasn't all huge crowds. There were the ups and there were the downs. It was decent. But where the difference for the A-League, we played during the winter, and some of the grounds were just horrendous. You were playing like a cow field. It was like playing back in Scotland again. Like you went to Connor Reserve where Press and Macedonia played, and you're up to your ankles in mud sometimes. It wasn't the quality of football. There were some amazing players. You look at some of the foreign players, and I'm not including myself in this, like Zarko Ajakov and people. These guys were magicians. These were like world-class players who came to play in the National League. And they were still head and shoulders above everybody playing on a shit field, These were some class players. But the standard was good and it was very competitive. And in those days, you could still tackle from behind. So you needed shin pads in the back of your legs as a striker, because it was rough. But yeah, there were some great rivalries there. Now with the National Second Division going to happen starting at the back end of this year in the Championship model for the first couple of years, a lot of those old NSL teams will come back for the National Second Division.
Yeah, I think there's some challenges around that, getting that up and running. I've gathered there's been a fair bit of blowback from the various associations, the state associations about losing some of their premier teams to another competition. So
yeah, they're not that helpful.
No, it doesn't seem that way from the press. So when you were coaching during your time, you coached for a number of fairly big names in the NSL, both as assistant player manager and a head coach at Northern Spirit. I believe you coached some of the players that ultimately ended up at the Mariners with you in your first season. Is that right?
I think we brung, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it was up about 10 or 11 players we brought. and this is just off the top of my head, with Wilco, Hutch, Kwasnick, I think Noel Spencer. We brung quite a lot of the boys, because when the guys came to me about coming to the Mariners, and it wasn't even called the Mariners then, it was the centre team on the Central Coast. When they approached me when I was at Northern Spirit, would I take the coaching job on? Then we started piecing it all together. And so late 2004, we started coming up here, had meetings with Central Coast Football, and we were just trying to get support up at Mingara Club. You know, the guys here, the guys, Brian Sewell, and these guys, a lot of people don't know the history. Brian Sewell, Andrew, so Jerry Ratterman, Brian Sewell, and Andrew, isn't it? It will come to me. They were the three guys who approached me to come and put the team together. They were the ones who put the business plan. They were the ones who went to Mingara Club and spoke to Mingara Club about us using it as a base, a training base. Mingara Club met with all the officials for FFA to say that they're fully supporting the club. Andrew Sylvester, that's the other guy. And when I moved in my new house in Gosford, the new apartment, Jerry Ratterman, the American guy, he's in the same apartment block as Jacko was, because Jacko's the same. He's in the other building, but he didn't even know that Jacko wouldn't have a clue any of that stuff that happened 21 years ago. But it's just a small world. But these guys, they actually got 5% in the club at the beginning, and then they got their shares diluted, but they were never recognised. They were never recognised by anyone at the club at the beginning. But these were the three guys on that day, when Melbourne Cup Day 2004, when they announced, FFA announced that the Mariners had got one of the 8 spots. That was that's when it all kicked in.
What was it like coaching at the Mariners in those early days? I'm given from what the stories I'm told, that the club was something of an itinerant around the coast, with coaching, with training venues, and long before the COE was completed.
So at the beginning we turned up March 2005. So when I opened as the mayor, I opened the new hotel at the Mariners in March. And it was the same week that the Mariners actually started training at Mingara, which was just bizarre. I told them, when I done the opening, I actually told them the history. 20 years ago this week, we started training for the first time. We walked in Mingara Club. We had a wee office behind the post office in the foyer, and we trained over at the athletic track, which was great. And I don't know if you can remember, but they had the Chinese all-you-could-eat in Mingara Club at that time, the chew and spew, the boys used to call it. And they'd done a deal where we get the meals at lunchtime. But when you come in and you can eat all you want, after 3 or 4 days, you were sick looking at it. And we used to come in the club and people used to say, who are you guys? Who are you guys? Because we come in with, and at that time, our training gear hadn't all arrived from Reebok. That's when Reebok done the 8 clubs. We were training in running t-shirts and running shorts with big high cuts, and it was purple. I think purple, like burgundy colour we wore. It was like we looked like athletes, not football players. But we soon got the strips and that through, and we trained at Mingara for most of the season, because around about September time the kids' athletics started, so we had to move. So over my 5 years as a coach, we had 19 different training venues on the coast. And then some days I'd be away picking up the chickens and the salad in the morning for the boys' lunch. That was my daily routine. I'd get a text from council saying the ground's closed, and then it was like, where do we go? With Wyong Hockey Field on the AstroTurf, Wyong Hockey Field on the grass pitch, Canmore, Budgewoi, King's College in Sydney. We went down there 1 day a week. The bit of grass out the back of the stadium, that wee bit of grass with the marquee, as we trained there for a month because all the grounds were closed. Niagara Park Indoor Hall. We used that as futsal because we couldn't get outside. So we had 19 different training venues in my 5 years.
That must have been hugely challenging, just keeping everything on track. And
then when Aloisi turned up, Vidmar turned up and they were a burnt car. We're training up at Tukley Way in the long jetty we were, and there were a burnt out car in the middle of the field. He's going, what the fuck is this? And then Aloisi turned up his first day, and we're playing an 8v8 in the middle of the park. And then this woman's walking her dog out, and the dog had a shit in the middle of the park. She just walked right through the park. But as a good coach, what I did was pick up the yellow cone and just scoop the shit up and then play on. So, but they boys are going and they're going, what is this? Is this professional football or what?
Yeah.
So it was. Now we had some funny times, and it just made the team that first 5 years. We weren't the best team, we weren't the best players, but we were the best team. You know, we spent the base salary cap, but we just had a great bunch of boys that would have done anything for you, and I'm still the gaffer to most of these boys, and a lot of them now still live on the coast, and I'm still the gaffer to them, which is nice that they still call that.
Were you surprised that you qualified for the grand final in that first season?
We were always kind of confident because we won the pre-season cup, and then we were competitive, and we had a bad run early, and then we had that run near the end, and then it was all this shit about Sydney this and Sydney that, and the press were getting the boys to get pictures taken with their shit cars, and they were putting the Sydney players in their Porsches and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say surprised because we had something special. And that first grand final was like it was amazing. Like we got there and get beat with one goal. The crowd we had, you know, when you see, like I saw those pictures you put up today on their Facebook post for those early days, the B16, the Mariners, the supporters, Yellow Gold Army, and that, you know, it just gave me goosebumps just looking back to those days. But that the first grand final, it wasn't a surprise, but so satisfying to we just chucked a team together. No money, no training venues. I had no contract because I was never given a contract the first year in case the club folded it and they had to pay me out my money. So I was never got paid and everything and got the money agreed on. I got it, but I never got a contract. And that's why Sydney FC and that's why John Singleton got involved. And Singleton phoned me up one night on the way home for Sydney, and I think he'd been drinking. He said, I'm going to come to your house, you better. And I'll not say the words he was because he called me a Scottish B. He said, you're going to sign, you're not going to those Sydney FC big time Charlies. And I met him down at Iguanas, and that's when he handed me the phone as he got out of the car, and it was John O'Neill, the chairman of FFA, saying, Lawrie, get as much money as you can because you're not going to Sydney FC. Singles just told Frank Lowy to fuck off. And I went in and signed a 5-year deal in the back of a $40 Mother's Day menu. And he said, whatever the club don't pay, I'll pay the balance. And I phoned Lyle because Lyle was the one who wouldn't give me the contract. Not that he wouldn't give me, he just didn't want to risk it. And I told him signing a 5-year deal, and he wasn't happy, but I never gave a shit because it was Single. If he refused to pay me, Single was going to pay me anyway. So it worked out well. The club honoured it, and I got shares in the club. Well, they were all diluted years ago, and I got shares in the club every year. And yeah, so that's, I think, probably the longest term contract ever in the A League. So it's 5 years, but that's when I stepped down the last year and Arnie came in. I was part of bringing Arnie in because that 4 years, it was a slog. Like every day was just a slog with training and Arnie, they spent an extra $1 million the next year when Arnie came in, and that's when the Centre of Excellence opened as well. They had a training base and they could start being like a real football team. But we made it work. We made 2 grand finals. I think we made the finals 3 or 4 times, won the pre-season cup. So a lot of great memories. We achieved a lot with not a lot, if that makes sense.
Won the league as well, if memory serves me.
Year 3, we had a great run, and I can remember the night it was pissing down the rain in the Friday night. Quaz cut in for the left, and he's hit this thing that deflected and dropped in the top corner. And I turned around to Fergie and Tobin on the bench and said, "That's won us the league," because it was come down to goal difference. So
Yeah.
that's won us the league. I think we maybe beat them 3-1 or something. And then Sydney, I phoned Ernie Merrick up on the Sunday. No, I phoned Kevin Muscat. I said, "Muskie, fucking do the job against Sydney." He said, "They'll not beat us. They'll not beat us." And I remember watching the game, and that's when the big keeper, what they call me, went on to playing in Japan. He just came back. He got injured there. He
Oh,
he'd been Yeah, he'd been put in goals as a young boy, and I'm going, "What's Merrick doing here?" And we got the result. It carried us, and that's when Adelaide were playing Brisbane down in Adelaide, and we needed Brisbane not to get a result. And it was at half time, and Danny Tiato got sent off for punching somebody, and that's when we'd done the group phone and got everybody. We all met in Terrigal pub because we're going to win the league. If that result finished that way, we're going to win the league. And Lyle Gorman gave us $1,000 to put behind the bar, and we were there. We watched the second half at the Terrigal pub, and all the punters were all joining in. And we had a great night, and we won the minor premiership, which was amazing.
that's incredible. Oh, tremendous stories. I mean, the league, I guess, has moved on in many respects in the time since then. But I think those kind of stories really speak to a different sort of character and a different mentality, don't they? In many ways.
Oh yeah, it was just we just had to do what we had to do. When like Millie Jednak signed, he was training with us for 3 or 4 months. He was training 3 days a week, not getting nothing. He was ready to pack it in, and then we were allowed to play him in the pre-season cup, so we took him to Bundaberg with us. That's when Vidmar just signed, and he wasn't playing, but he came. And Millie got the flu. He got the cold up the night in the hotel, and he couldn't play the next day. He wasn't allowed out of the hotel. So Millie thought he'd missed his chance, and that was him. But then lucky somebody got injured, and we signed Millie right just the week before the season started, and I think he played up in Newcastle. And I remember Lyle Gorman saying, "Oh, he never done much, did he?" I said, "No, he did all right. Don't worry about him." And he went on. He was there for the 2 years, and I was a big thing. I was a big part of him getting transferred because the club weren't going to sell him. They got 800 and odd grand for him, which was a huge transfer for us at the time. But Lyle wanted more, so I pushed the case to let him go. And then we were sitting at second in the league when he went to Turkey, and we never won a game, and we never won a game in the finals. We got beat in the first round because he was that big a loss to us.
That's again the juggling act that is the Mariners, isn't it? I mean, the buying and selling of players has always been part of the make.
Always been. And you look at Matt Simon, the local one, he was another one who gave up his trade for weeks and months to try and get a gig. I saw him the year before playing with East Gosford against Wyoming in the grand final. And he came down to train, and he trained for months and months. And it wasn't until the end of that year he got his contract. And that first year, I think, he's either on the bench or got substituted. He never scored a goal. And he went away with the Olympic team. And then he came back for that, and he scored against Newcastle, and rest history is the club's record all-time goal scorer.
I think it speaks to, as I say, a different time when players really did have to do the hard yards, to get anywhere. Really, they had to really put the time in behind the scenes. And
Yeah, because we didn't have the spare budget. We couldn't just go, "Yeah, he's a good player, sign it." We needed to wait to injury replacement players or somebody left because just things were so tight. And then like season 3, and we signed Aloisi at the beginning of that season, single because he was a sponsor for the first 3 years, I think. He matched what Frank Lowy gave us with Westfields. So we were getting 250 grand a year off Westfields and getting that off single. And a lot of people don't know that. It was Strawberry. I remember on the shorts, it was Strawberry Hills' his stud. And he, at the beginning of the season, he said, "Oh, would you like Aloisi?" I said, "Fuck, we love Aloisi." but it was too much money. And singles go, but who does he think he is? Blah, 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 blah. Then he came on the market again, and halfway through the season, and the agent came to me, and it was a lot less money, and I went to Single, and Single actually sponsored Single, put the money in the club, so that the club he gave the money, other sponsorship money, to help cover the wages of John Aloisi, and he scored 8 or 9 goals when he came in. He missed a penalty in Newcastle, mind you, because that semi-final, people ask me what's your best game, and I would say that game when we were down 2-0, Aloisi missed a penalty up at Newcastle, and to beat them 3-0 at home in extra time to a full house was just, when Kwasnick scored that goal, and then Sash Petrovsky, and it was just, what a night. That's stuff that you dream of, that's coming back for 2-0 down, and getting the grand final.
Right, if memory serves me, the stadium was pretty full that night, almost full.
Sellout. It was a sellout that night. It was the official crowd was 19,000 something.
Yeah.
But it was an actual sellout, because just sometimes with the boxes, if the boxes aren't full, there's still tickets available. So that was a sellout and a great night. And then I remember when we left to go to the grand final, there were about 6,000 or 7,000 people in the water, the park next to Iguanas, to farewell. Fans were all over the bridges, all the way up to the freeway. It was amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah, so we come back to the Leagues Club that night, and there were like 600 or 700 fans. No, that was the Sydney FC game. Like, the place was absolute chock. The second game we went to Mingara, and that was like standing room only.
Do you still ponder what might have been had the handball on the line by James Holland been given in that grand final?
James Holland, I signed him.
I
signed him at the Mariners, and then gave him his debut, and then he when we signed Aloisi, he thought, I'm not going to get a game, and that's when his agent came to get. He said, "Look, can James get in? We'll let him go." But because what I always said about that was, we had the momentum going. If we get that penalty and we score, we've got all the momentum, and we'd go into extra time, and there was no doubt in my mind we would have won the game, because the momentum was. It's all, football, it changes. You can see it change, and we were pumping them. You get that goal, and you go on and win that grand final, no doubt. And I remember, I was never one to bag the refs or stuff like that, but in the press conference after, they brought it up. Press brought it up. I said, "Well, I'm not saying nothing. You saw it. You just write what you saw." And it was shocking. Danny's touched the referee's finger. He's pushed it out of the way when he was arguing, and he got like 10 weeks ban, which was ridiculous. And the next day, FFA had a conference that I had to go to, so I was a fucking happy chap that day. And then the media manager shouted at me later on and said, "Lawrie, we've got a problem. We're Mad Monday." So I went out and, "So what is it?" He said, "Oh, John Hutchison's dressed as John McDonald. The John McDonald when he played with Celtic, because he was dressed with Celtic strap, and he had big artificial bum cheeks outside the shorts, because Scott McDonald had a big arse." I said, "What's wrong with that? Scott McDonald's got a big arse." Then he said, "Andre Gumprecht dressed as," because you had to dress as somebody that was like you. So Andre Gumprecht dressed as Adolf Hitler, who was fucking German. Oh, it didn't go down well with Frank Lowy.
No, but
And that's when the media camped outside Goomsey's house for the Monday to the Thursday to try and get stories. It was chaos. And this is a day after a grand final, you've just been robbed.
Yeah.
Going back 6 months after that, the referee, nice guy for Brisbane.
Mark Shield, wasn't it?
Mark Shields, thank you. He phoned me up out the blue and said, "Can I come up and see you, Lawrie, to just talk about the grand final?" I said, "Of course you can." And I met him at Cafe Pinoz, around the corner from where the Mariners office used to be at Tuggerah. And he came to apologise. He apologised, and which was great. And I said, I said, Mark, I really appreciate it so much, but I just wish he'd done it closer to the time. But I really appreciate you coming up here. And he said, look, I missed it. I missed it. And after the game, when I saw it, it was just like I hated it, and I stuffed up. And it was just nice. It was just nice that he actually did that.
I think you can live with people genuinely making a mistake and owning it, Lawrie. I guess as a fan, you often feel there is an agenda against the Mariners in terms
Yeah.
of things get adjudicated. Did you ever get a sense of that as the coach?
I think I just thought it followed me because when I went to Newcastle, when I went up there as a CEO with the VAR broke down for 30 seconds in that goal against the victory. So I just thought it was my fault. I just thought I was jinxed. But no, I never always tried not to blame referees. I'd rather look at it and compliment the opposition team if they're better than us. If you go back through my interviews, if we get well beaten, so I just say it. I look at TV nowadays, and most of the coaches look for excuses why they never won. They don't actually look at how they played.
Mm.
I'd much rather put my hand up and say we never actually performed, did they?
Well, the adage is what goes around comes around and eats.
Big believer in that, Mark. You make your own luck, and if you actually weigh up those offside goals or that, at the end of the season, I'm sure it balances out, definitely. But it's a grand final. It's a hard one to take sometimes in the grand final.
For sure. I think, if my recollection even of the 2005-06 grand final was that we were the better side in the first half, and could have scored two.
We should have been up. Brownie could have scored. Stuart Petrie. We had chances. We had definitely chances. I wouldn't say we dominated, but we had the better of the game in the first half, definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That was a very vivid recollection of mine. We'd only been, obviously, all of us had only been following the Mariners a short time, but I'll never forget that. Or any of the grand finals, quite frankly. So arguably we could have 2 or 3 more in the trophies in the cupboard, couldn't we?
You look at Newcastle and Sydney with me and Brisbane with Arnie. Could be another 3 quite easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's stories that at times, during the difficult days, that you ended up helping some of the players out financially when money was tight. Is there any truth to that? I mean, not without.
No, there are a lot of truth. That myself and John Mackay, who's the CEO, the first season we paid the air. I think I paid the airfares to Adelaide. For the extra staff and that, John paid bills. It was when boys were a wee bit short. We thought no, it was all true. First, but we just myself and John just kept it quiet and in the background and did what we had to do.
Yeah, it's I think that money has always been a challenge for the Mariners, more so at some times than others. But the successful years under Arnie certainly came at a financial cost that nearly broke the club. So it's been a very, very fine balancing act. But on more sort of positive terms, who would you say were the players you enjoyed coaching the most during your time at the Mariners? Who were players that you really saw them either got great deal of satisfaction from seeing them develop in the way you hoped they would, or were just a pleasure to train and coach?
So Millie, and not because he went on to become the soccer, he came in, he was going to give the game away. A friend of his family phoned me to give him a chance. And to see him take that chance, he was a big quiet guy. But he scored some wonderful goals for us, great goals, and went on to do it with the Socceroos and be a great leader. And you have to go to Hutch. I first coached Hutch in Northern Spirit, and I can't remember this, but apparently I told him he's got 2 weeks to pull his finger out or I was pissing him off because he was a bit of a boy, and I just pulled him, and we Hef came in that first season with Hef, 8 goals for left fullback was like an amazing thing. When you'd him, and again I speak to Hutch every week. He's in Japan, and I see Hef a lot down at Terrigal. And but some of the boys when you see some of the young ones, like Kwasnick could have been anything. He's the second top goal scorer. Like Kwasi had tricks up his sleeve. I didn't even know what he do. I had to ask him after to show me what he did because I had no idea. You know, I try something like that in the football park, I'd fall over. You know, like, because he had that much ability. I don't think he realised himself how good he could have been. I remember we played Melbourne Victory down at Olympic Park, full house. That's when Melbourne Victory had 3 Brazilians. And Brownie scored, I think Kwas scored. And at the press conference, they were just going on about the Brazilians. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I said, if Adam Kwasnick was called Quasaldinho, you would be raving about the boy. He scored, I think he scored 2 that night and Brownie got 1. I says, you've not even mentioned the boy, and you're talking about 3 Brazilians who are just trying to nutmeg people and kept giving the ball away. You don't become a football player if I can give them the ball. It's all about keeping the ball. And I think a lot of time we never got the credit. You know, hard-working team do that. Yeah, they work hard. They do this. They do that. Yeah, we work hard, but there was some great football, direct football, and some great goals, and some great, like Stu Petrie, like he done a great job that first year for us. Noel Spencer was a great captain that first 2 years. Wilco, you look at Wilco. I had an argument with the chairman when I made Wilco the captain in year 3 because Lyle thought a captain had to be a shouter and demanding, whereas Wilco's a captain everywhere he went. He did it by action. He set the example for everybody else to follow. And he did an amazing career, and now he's still got a career after football with Sydney FC. Like, Wilco was just a gentleman, like, on the coast, because we did so much work in the schools and stuff. We always used to send Wilco because when I was at school, if you were a school prefect, you were a softie. You know, you weren't a cool guy. Whereas Wilco was the school captain, and he was cool because he was still a football player. And we used to send Wilco to other schools to say, "Hey, I was the school captain, and I can play football and I can do this and do that." And we used him as a role model.
Yeah.
And Nigel Bogard, he was injured that many times in the first 2 years. He went to every school on the coast. But Paul Burnett for the Mingara Club still tells the story when the Mingara were doing a learn to read thing at schools, and we sent the injured players, and Bog he was injured for those first couple of years. He went, and when they went, and the Mingara Club got a letter from the mother stating that the kid would never read, but after Nigel went there and read the book, his reading just improved out of sight. And Paul Burnett still uses that story now when he's talking about what impact the Mariners had on the community. And that, just a little one about Nigel making this wee boy think it was cool to read.
I still remember the club bookmarks with the players' photographs on them. That was part of that drive.
Yeah. I remember we done the club nights with all the junior clubs in the off season, and we used to cause problems because there were too many cars turned up in the council. You know, there were people driveways blocked in, and we had to limit it to 200. I think it was 200 players, and we'd go to all the junior clubs. We would train them, and then it became a competition who gave us the best barbecue after it. So it was a competition to see who fed us the best. So, but the boys used to love that. They get as much out of it as the kids did.
Yeah.
And that was the days when, right at the beginning, those first 5 years, we did that every pre-season.
I think you know the club has kind of drifted in and out of those kind of levels of engagement over the years, Lawrie, for one reason or another. But it's vital that the club and the community are very united.
It has to. In a place like the Central Coast, you have to, in my opinion, the players have to be a part of the culture of the coast. You know, they have to be out there.
So on the flip side of the players you loved coaching, who were the players you didn't enjoy coaching so much? Are you able to share some names with us? Who were either not great trainers. I mean, I heard that Trent Sainsbury was an awful trainer. He was too languid and laid back. And
I signed Sainsbury in 2010, but Arnie coached them.
Yeah.
So I signed him during that season. So I never had him training. training wise, Danny Vukovic thought he was a striker. Adam Koznick thought he was a goalkeeper. So Brad Porter used to knock in the crosses, and Danny Vukovic used to head them in or do bicycle kicks and put them in the top corner. Quaz even had his own gloves with Koznick written on them because Danny got on them. So they used to some if we had lazy players, the players dealt with it.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to actually training, the boys all put in because the culture in the dressing room, we had a lot of good leaders there. We didn't have many boys that I would say were bad trainers. We'd I'm trying to think of some examples. But I couldn't on it, and it's not because I'm not saying it. I can't. Nobody was really any problems whatsoever with the boys because everybody knew what the rules were. You buy into it or you fuck off, basically, and
Well,
that's what the rules were.
function of the no dickheads policy, isn't it?
Yeah, no, and that was. And you look over the years when certain people's left the dressing room, maybe things haven't been quite as happy well after I left. And but no, we'd some great leaders, and Hutch was one of them, and as I said, Spenny earlier, and you had a great senior group of players, and then you've got guys like Vidmar and Aloisi coming in your dressing room. It certainly makes people lift up and go, and having people like Mark Bosnich. Don't forget Mark Bosnich. He made them. He was there for 10 games, and I still see they're an ad that the A-League use, and he pulls off that triple save in Wellington. Unbelievable. It was a triple save. I've never saw anything like that in my life. I always remember his first game. It was a pre-season cup game up in Brisbane at Perry Park against Brisbane, and he was a shit trainer. So there's one. Bosnich was shit at training. So I said to him, "You're coming on the second half," and John Crawley was a goalkeeping coach. And I said, "Boys, are going to warm up." So he's down just doing the groin stretch, and he's keeping looking at me. I'm ready. I says to Crawley, "Is that him warming up?" He says, "That's him. That's him." I said, and he walked up. I said, "Are you ready?" Hey. And he used to call me Sir Alex Ferguson. But he called me, "No, Gaffer, I'm fine. I'm ready." So I put him on. He was on about 2 minutes, and Brisbane got a penalty. And I'm going, fuck, he's going to pull a hamstring diving for this or something. He saved it. He saved it, and he's looked over at the bench and he just gave me the wave. And I don't know if you remember when we played Sydney FC in the pre-season cup, I brung I think it was Danny. I took Danny off. We played Boz. That's when we played Boz, and we substituted him a couple of minutes to go because we had about 6,000 or 7,000 for the pre-season game, the pre-season cup. And Bosnich, he got a standing ovation coming off, and that's why we hooked him.
Yeah.
And Sydney FC fans, our fans, he was great for the dressing room. His major issue was we never had hair dryers in the dressing room, and he couldn't. He had issues with his hair because I think he had a bit of work done up there. But Boz was a shocking trainer. But those games, the few games he did play, he just. You talk about Mark Bosnich playing with the Mariners, it's a bit better than Usain Bolt impersonating a football player.
Yeah, please don't remind me. What would you say were your best memories and your worst memories during your time at the CCM, Lawrie?
I think that game, as said, against Newcastle was like coming back for 2-0 for the first leg. When Danny Vukovic, the grand final when we both grand finals, when I come home, I felt as though I'd let everybody down. And it wasn't me that let them down. The boys gave everything, but sitting those two grand finals and looking at the crowd, and the majority of the crowd stayed. It wasn't as though they pissed off, but you don't realise how long it is out there. You've just lost the grand final, and it seems like an eternity that you're sitting there waiting to get your medal and they get the trophy. And I personally felt I'd let the coast down because we never won, because we could have won both those games. And that was, it made me sad because I knew we were good enough to do it, but we never done it on the day, although we played reasonably well. Both we had our share of the games. I felt as though I take it personally that I'd let the people of the coast down. But that was, yeah, I don't know if I've ever recovered for that. I
I think,
have.
fortunately, they don't award trophies on honesty and effort, do they? And
And then in the half, like that 3-2 game against the 3-0 game against Newcastle, Adelaide game down in Adelaide, and that was the pictures was on your Facebook page the day that we know that the crowd was down in the corner. I remember Vuka running the full length of field with Wayne O'Sullivan over his shoulder. It was just my son was there at the game. It was to get to that grand final when we came back up for Sydney, and obviously the boys had a big night out, and Quaz was sick in the bus not long before and that's when Sarah and Dwayne came up live in the busways in the radio.
oh,
And we had to get somebody to get his bag out below the bus. We couldn't let the boys in. We're at Mingara Club and there were hundreds of fans there. So Quaz had a wee bit too much to drink. But that game down in Adelaide was huge. Because we got pumped. I think Tom Ponley scored that kind of wee back heel. And we get pumped for like 80 odd minutes. And I remember late on in the game, Danny Vuka had an amazing game, and I was laughing on the bench. They had a shot, and Vuka's put over the bar or something. And John Crawley said, "What are you laughing at?" I says, "They're not going to score. They can't score." And that was right. Like we won the game 1-0, and to qualify, just to see the players and the fans, and it was just those were little special things. Yeah, I won the coach of the year the first year. Fuck, I should have won it the third year. Fucking Van Egmond got it. But um, but those moments where the fans were part of it, and even though there were only a couple of hundred down in Adelaide, it was just special that we qualified for a first grand final.
absolutely. What roles did you hold after you Arnie handed the reins over to Arnie as coach? What roles did you then hold at the club?
So I was like general manager of football. So I organised the travel, the training, all that stuff. So I done similar to what Matt Simon's doing now. So I did that. Then I got the opportunity to go to China through the Mariners. That was through Sheffield United. So I went to Chengdu Blades for 6 months, which was a great experience. I come back, I resigned there, come back, because what a lot of people don't realise, I was going to resign anyway because the chairman was in jail with match fixing, but Single was looking to buy the club and he wanted me to come back and be the CEO. So I resigned and come back and they never bought the club. So then a month later, I went back to China to Division One, and I coached Chongqing Li Fan, and then that's when I come back and Single talked me into running for council and being then I got the mayor's gig for 4 years, and then I went to Newcastle as a CEO. One of the Chinese guys I'd met in China, and then he moved to Australia. He brung the buyer to buy them, and I had to introduce them to FFA because FFA wouldn't give them 2 minutes, so I had to do that introduction, and then they wanted me to go up there as a CEO, which I did for 5 years. And
did you find that decision, did that play on your mind at all about going to our fiercest rivals? Sorry, I mean, at the end of the day, it's an opportunity for you to continue your involvement with football, obviously.
yeah, no, that's how, because every now and again, like, I had a great relationship with the Mariners fans when I went up there, and it's now, and the Jets fans, after what I'd done and put in the money to save them and stuff, and what we achieved when I was there, had a great relationship. Every now and again, I'd get somebody in the coast saying, "Oh, you're a traitor." And I would say, "Well, I've offered my services to the club many times for no payment, and the club knocked me back, didn't want me to help them. So I have to look after my family." And when you told them that, they went, "Oh, I see what you're coming. I
I
see
think
where you're coming from.
some of the things, some of the, I suppose, the activity or the shenanigans that went on. I mean, like the large shirt at the home game and all that stuff. You were just trying to drum up tension around the derby, and
That's all it was. It was to get people to come to the game. And Fox, when I told Fox about it, when me and Joe Griffiths came up with it, it was a big flag. It was a big flag, and I thought it was funny. And so did Fox. Fox loved it, and the club joined in as well. The Mariners, they let us bring it up. We coerced it before. It was to drum up support for the derby that was coming up.
yeah,
There were no badness meant about it at all. I still giggle about that. I still go on YouTube and watch Joe Griffiths at the back because he done that little dance thing because his son said, "If you do this, Dad, you have to dance." And I can't remember what the dance was called, but all the kids were doing it. So Joel, if you actually watch Joel on the other side of the flag, he's actually doing a wee dance.
yeah, I did.
And now Joel, so enemy number one's now got the Aussie home loans down the main street of Gosford. So there you go. Now he's helping coasties get mortgages.
Go. There you go. Well, the rivalry's been, it's a healthy one, and I think to a degree it's reignited in recent seasons. More so. So, long may that continue.
Yeah, definitely. You need a good derby and something that means something to the fans as well. It doesn't matter how you're doing in derby. It doesn't matter how you're doing in the league. You have to beat your opposition.
Yeah,
You have to beat your derby. I was never a big fan of the bit of tar macadam for the trophy, so I was never a fan of that.
that and the guardrail.
Oh yeah, but that came after me, so I was well gone. No, I was nothing to do with that.
Am I right in saying that you've always been a season ticket holder at CCM, Laurie, over the whole time? Or
No, so because I was a shareholder, I always got season tickets, but that stopped. Maybe it stopped 3 or 4 years ago, but I got them as a shareholder for years, and as you know, I used them, and even when I was at the Jets, I still came to games, and now I'm at most home games. We all the boys are swimwear, and we go and we enjoy football and being supporters.
yeah, well, as you say, first and foremost, you've always been a fan. So
What I always wanted to do, I never did. I've done a lot of things, but I always wanted to be up 2-3-0 the last couple of minutes, and I always wanted to run up the tunnel and come in and jump into the base 16. That was and I told Christine that I said, I'm going to do, if we got up 2-3 goals, I'm going to do it. I'm going to say, you can't do that. And I just wanted to run up and get in there and just spend the last couple of minutes with the punters.
yeah,
And I never ever got a chance. Oh, I did at the grand final when they beat the Wanderers. I had my shirt off. I was scaring people. I remember Debbie Neal followed me, and I've ripped my shirt off. Debbie Neal was the MP, and she saw me rip my shirt off, and she pissed off. She said, "I'm not going in there with them." So I had my shirt off, and I had the hairy chest out for show, which Fox picked up. Fox picked it up, and the newspapers picked it up.
yeah. Oh, I mean that first grand final win was just felt like such a weight lifted off the club, really.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it was a very memorable day. I remember being in the pub in the Fox studios before the game, and it's just the build up and the atmosphere. It was just special.
Yeah, absolutely. But there was a sense of inevitability about that grand
Yeah,
final.
yeah,
And,
no, no.
yeah. I've heard also that you were involved in introducing Richard Peel to CCM. Is that the case? And if so, how did that come about?
I was down in Canberra, and Andy Burnell. I've known Andy for a lot of years, and I spoke to Richard then, and then I got a phone Monty to get a trial for his boy, and then he signed his boy, and then I introduced Richard to the club, and he done the deal with Mike, and yeah, so I brought him to the club.
Yeah. It's a shame that didn't blossom further, but it certainly gave us a good couple of years of success.
Amazing couple of years. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, but it's hard to emulate, even go close to emulating how good that was. And to smash Melbourne City in a grand final the way the boys did was, you couldn't have got a bet on that. It was the odds would just be unbelievable. And I run the bus for the surf club, and we had the best the best day. I got a box of cupcakes for Kyla. We had 52 people in the bus, and the girls in the bus at the front, they knew I was a Mariners coach, but they never even came to football games. They came to this, and they never realised everybody knew me. So when we're coming into Paramat, all the fans were at the windows banging it, like, all cheering and that, because I was at the front. They were going, "You're really famous." So they were they were quite impressed. So it was we had a great night. It was a great night.
Oh, it was incredible. No, I don't think, again, I felt in my gut that we were going to win that game. I think it was going to be 6-1? Absolutely not.
Yeah. No, it was special. And when I went to Oman last year with the Asian Cup final and when we taken over the supporters and that was just another special moment. You're there to watch. And I remember Harry Steele's mum the night before said, "Lawrie, do you think I can go on the tour?" And it was last minute. We managed to get her on, and to see the two of them with Harry at the fence with the trophy, you can't buy that stuff. That stuff just doesn't happen. And if it hadn't been for her seeing me coming out of the water and saying, "Oh, Lawrie, you still get room," it wasn't the room, it was actually just getting things booked. But to see them at the end of the game holding that trophy with Harry it was worth the money, that was worth it. It was just one of those special moments that you'll never see again.
And, those moments in time that they're very precious, aren't they? And they're very fleeting, and they're few and far between. So now we obviously need to congratulate you on becoming mayor again for a second time. And I just wanted to ask whether you are keen to see the council working with CCM to maximise the benefits of collaboration for both the club and the region. Are there any things that you're in working with the club on with relation to that?
Well, no, the council's no working as such, but I speak to Greg all the time, David Slade, but things, potential investors, I pass them on and stuff like that. Although, there's still things happening in the background now. As a council, because people kind of forget the council was broke for those 4 years and they're still digging themselves out of that hole. So the club is an important thing of the Central Coast, but actually specifically working on anything at the moment. We've worked. Oh, that's more the stadium. There've been stuff on the stadium, but no specific stuff with the club at the moment. But anytime the club, like we put on the civic reception for the girls a few weeks ago, which was fantastic. We had about 450, 500 people there just with 3 days to organise it. And that was hard just putting it together because a lot of the girls are all like cats, they were just going everywhere. But we managed to do it with a fantastic night. So that was put on just by council, the two girls in my office, and then they got other staff and the Marler staff, and it was pulled together really quick and just a great night. But they're nothing specific because the stadium's under lease from with Venues Live, and they work with the club at the moment.
I think that's one of the great shames about the council having been in administration for such an extended period was that there was no opportunity to do something to mark the treble last season.
Yeah. But apparently they did try.
Right.
Apparently council tried, but to get everything together was just really hard with the timing. And then I think that rugby league game was on the Saturday or Sunday in Gosford. And it was just, so apparently they did try because the girls in my office were involved, but it just never worked out. Just timing and stuff just didn't work.
What a shame, because I remember the street parade after the 13 grand final was
I initiated that and I couldn't even go. And that's because Sarah Buggy, who was the first PA that we had there, the little Sarah, the little blonde one who travelled for the first 2 years from Cronulla every day up to the coast. She was getting married that day, and I had to go to the wedding.
My word.
So I couldn't even go.
Well, it was a great event, and we thank you for putting it all together. And I think that there was a hope and an expectation from the fans that something similar might have occurred
Yeah.
after the Rebel, but yeah, unfortunately, it didn't come to.
But I'm sure there was something to do with it. Was it the Bulldogs? I can't remember. There were a rugby league game that weekend, and it made it all too hard, I think.
Well, it's
Yeah.
water under the bridge now, sadly, but
We
hopefully,
do it next year. We can just do it next year.
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all the questions that I had, Colin. But I have been noticing that a number of things have been popping up in the chat whilst we've been talking. So, is there anything there that we'd like to ask Lawrie while we've got the opportunity?
Just the one yeah, there are a couple, but before we do, going back to Danny Vukovic pretending to be a striker, I seem to remember when we did a similar session with him that as a junior, he actually played in the same team as Mark Bridge.
Yep, Bridgie up at Sperry's.
And Danny Vukovic scored more goals than Mark Bridge in a season.
No, I believe that. Danny, he was actually decent. And yeah, because they played up at St Mary's, because Quaz lived, I think Quaz was at St Clair and they were at St Mary's, so they all knew each other pretty close. But no, he was decent. And I saw his dad down at Terrigal a few weeks ago and we was actually talking about it then. But no, I would believe that. I would definitely believe that he scored more goals than Bridgie.
Well, I think he's the only goalkeeper in the A League to have scored a goal, is he not?
He scored the penalty in Wellington. He was at Wellington, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was decent, and I would believe he did get more goals than Bridgie.
Yeah. So going to the questions that were asked, if we go back to the beginning, what made you believe in the Mariners and that it was a good idea for a team to be based here on the coast?
When those three guys came to me and they started talking about the population, we don't have a rugby league team, we've always been bypassed, and it was like, this has got a chance, and we had no idea whether we were going to get in. When that the day that it got announced, we had no idea that we were going to get across the line. We didn't even know how many clubs had actually put in interest to be in the league. We didn't know. But myself, Alec Tobin and Ian Ferguson, mostly I was doing it basically full time, was just drumming up that support. And it was the fact is, beautiful stadium, population base at that time would have been 250 or 300,000. And we just thought it had a chance. We just thought it was new, it was fresh. And how could they knock it back? We had Mangara as a training base, beautiful facility. They were a small sponsor financially. We just believed that we could get it up, and then putting the team together, it was quite an easy sell to the players to get them to move there. It was reasonably easy, and that was why and basically the old National League had finished, and I had my own business. I had some trucks in Sydney, and my boys we were doing that in the intern until the A League started, because there were about a year's hiatus where there were no professional football. It all went back. All the players went back to the state leagues. So it was like I had a couple of nibbles elsewhere, but that was the real only one that was opportunity for me. So I put 100% into it because I was wanting a job in football.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of our former players have ended up settling on the coast as well, haven't they?
Oh, we had a trilogy, the Trilogy Foundation, a couple of months ago now. We had a Mayor's 11 versus Robbie Slater's 11, and I think I had eight or nine ex-Mariners boys, and there were a couple couldn't make it, so I think I could have fielded a team. Yeah, so there's still a lot of boys. Hef, Kwasnick, Brad Porter's obviously from here, so is Brownie. Paul O'Grady's still on the coast. Wayne O'Sullivan's on the coast. The list goes on. There are a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
So the next one might be a little controversial, but in your opinion, would the A League be better being under the arms of the FFA rather than the APL? In your opinion?
Well, you look back where the league was going. You know, it was still quite healthy, and I was part of the club's breaking away. I was the CEO of Newcastle at the time, so I was involved in a lot of those meetings and discussions. But at the moment, it's not controversial. You look at the crowds and that now. Apart, like you look at Auckland, huge success. But you look at the crowd numbers, the interest, the TV viewership. You have to say the league was in a better condition. Simply, you just weigh it up now. The league was in a better state, in my opinion, when the FFA were looking after it.
Mm.
You know, it's too late now. Oh, well, we should have done, shouldn't that? The clubs, for all the right reasons, but then obviously we all know there were a lot of millions went on apps and stuff like that, and but it just needs to dig itself out. But I think putting Auckland into the league has been a huge plus. I think average crowds would be probably 16 or 17,000 people. It's been fantastic over there.
Yeah, I think hindsight's always a wonderful thing, but maybe a hybrid model, with partial FFA and partial club, ownership. I think the clubs had justifiable concerns about, not being able to realise their full potential income stream, things like that, Lawrie. So there was probably some relevance to that, but equally, the stewardship of the great game has certainly not gone forwards.
Yeah, it's not gone forward. So hopefully, and who knows, they might kiss and make up, and get something. They maybe get a new TV deal next year that'll kickstart it. But we need to get more recognition on media because it's a non-event.
Yeah, a lot of the time you're right. Yeah.
And one more, and it goes back to the subject of Joel Griffiths. So he was always, by Mariners fans, seen to be the villain. Is he like that off the field?
Nah, he's actually he was the first person I got involved when I went up there. I coached Joel as a 19-year-old when I was at Sydney United with Dave Mitchell, had him at Parramatta Power. He was a winner. He was a winner. And the Jets fans hated Hutch because Hutch was a winner as well. The two of them, and Joel told the story. Like, I only heard this when Joel started at the Jets with me, that Van Egmond had said they'll look to start something in the first when they kick off. So just be careful. If anything happens, everybody just run in. And I had told Hutch to do Griffiths with the because I knew Joe would get the ball. I said, do him. And Hutch did, and then everybody run in. I don't know if you remember, there were a melee in the middle of the field in the first kick of the ball, but Van Egmond read my memory, read my mind. So Joe, he was a winner. He was a good player, and he scored a lot of good goals. Had a good career overseas in China. I went over there when we went over to see the owner of the Jets, and we went to a Beijing Guan and Tianjin Ted a derby game, like 40, 50,000 there. Joe was like the Beatles. He was getting mobbed in the streets and in the game. Every time the ball went out of play, the cameras were in on him. He was royalty. But he's a really good guy, and even the Mariners boys on the field, yeah, you wanted to hate Joe, but off the field he got on really well, and but I can still remember the sack whack. I just about had a stroke on the side of the park when he's hit the linesman in the nuts for that throwing. I used to show everybody it. I used to Joe hated it. I even showed his kids it. He never showed his kids it, and I remember jumping. I jumped up that quick. I just about passed out. My head was spinning. And then as soon as they issued, we got on the phone with FFA the next day going, how did he not get sent off? Blah, blah. And because the yellow card get given, you can't deal with it again after that. It was dead and buried. And he got off with it and he slapped the guy in the nuts.
I think just about.
Story leaves its villains, doesn't it?
It was, and the worst ever hitting the nuts was John Hutchison's against Melbourne Victory. If you ever go on John Hutchison Melbourne Victory, and they've got it on YouTube, that was in. I still can hear Simon Hill and Andy Harper absolutely pissing herself in the commentator because he got carried off. He went back on again. but he got it was one of the South American boys kicked him right between the legs, and I felt sorry for him. But he's had a couple of kids since, so he's okay.
Yeah, absolute legend, Mr. H. One day, hopefully, he might be the coach of the club.
Yeah, hopefully, hopefully.
Is that everything we got, Colin?
Yeah, that's it. And I think that one at the stadium where he hit the linesman in the groin. I think every Mariners supporter remembers that one.
It's like the VAR thing up in Newcastle when Victory scored and he's a clear half meter. You look and go, how can people miss that? And this guy has just assaulted the linesman by slapping him in the nuts, and he got a yellow card. Fuck, if I'd have known that during my career, I'd have done it a few times as well. I'll take a yellow card.
Well, Lawrie, thank you so much for your time tonight. This has been one of our longest chats ever, I think. So it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Thank you for sharing those wonderful memories with us, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you around the coast for a long, long time yet, and hopefully for as a long time as our mayor.
I'll need to wear the chains to one of the games one day to take the piss. All right. No, thank you, and thanks for the support. I love when I come to games, when I see members for year one and all that. I still have hugs and kisses, and it takes me an hour to get to my seat, but I love it. I love it.
And it does get under your skin, this club, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. All right. Thank you, and thanks for the support over the years as well.
Absolute pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Lawrie, and we'll see you soon when we see you.
Thank you. Cheers, boys and girls. Ta-ta.
Sorry.
Aye, cheers.